Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We join you today from the Tick Research Lab that's part of OSU's Center for Veterinary Health Sciences. We're joined by Dr. Susan Little, who is a tick researcher and expert. And Dr. Little, we understand that ticks may be a little worse than usual in Oklahoma this year. Is that the case?
We actually are having a banner year for ticks, so we've had very high tick activity in most areas of the state. And although it's high, it's not entirely unusual for Oklahoma. I'd say about every 4 or 5 years we get some pretty intense tick activity.
The way I understand it, there's a number of reasons why we may be having this kind of banner year. Let's talk about some of those reasons.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's habitat, and we certainly have a lot of great natural habitat, wooded areas where ticks can really thrive with a dense understory and good humidity to keep them from drying out. And then you also need an ample wildlife population, and we have incredible white-tailed deer populations in many areas of the state, and those deer provide food for the ticks. The ticks also thrive on wild turkey. The immature ticks like to feed on wild turkey as well as deer, and we've had a resurgence of wild turkey population in the last couple decades that's been great in many ways, but also very good for the ticks.
In Oklahoma and Arkansas, the way I understand it, there really is a high population. Some of the reasons we've mentioned, the reasons why we love these states,
right.
Reasons why they really thrive here.
Absolutely. Those natural areas are good for ticks, and of course we enjoy them too, and we like to enjoy them with our dogs. And so there's been studies done where they just look at, of dogs coming into veterinary practices, what % of those dogs are infested with ticks, and consistently Oklahoma and Arkansas are number 1 and number 2 for the highest % of dogs infested with ticks. And so any veterinarian will tell you that you have to have tick control on your dog, and really we need to do that year round. Spring and summer, high tick activity, but they're also out in the fall and winter.
Let's talk about some of the most common types of ticks that we see in Oklahoma, and you have some examples to show us.
Well, sure. We have actually 6 major species and then several minor ones that are active in Oklahoma, but by far our number 1 tick is the Lone Star tick, Amblyomma americanum. It's a distinct tick. It has a white spot on the back of the female that gives it that name, the Lone Star tick, and then the male has some ornamentation on his back as well. And those ticks are so common. They actually represent 90% of ticks recovered from humans, from dogs, from horses in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, throughout the south central U.S.
And you have some ticks in the lab today that you kind of...
We do, and I'd be happy to show those to you.
Our guests today as well.
Yes, of course. So we have a couple of ticks to show you. This is the most common one. So Lone Star ticks, by far, most common in Oklahoma, but we also have deer ticks in the wintertime. We have American dog ticks. We have Gulf Coast ticks. Even though we're not a Gulf Coast state, the ticks have moved this far north. But this tick is, as I said, by far our most common and ecologically incredibly successful. You know, as a tick researcher, I understand all the problems they cause, the diseases they cause, but I'm also, as a biologist, just a bit in awe of this creature. They are so successful. This female Lone Star tick, if she were allowed to feed on a host, mated with a male, and then fully engorged, and many people have seen those engorged ticks on livestock or even on dogs where they're quite large, she'll lay a clutch of 6,000, 8,000, sometimes even 10,000 eggs, just a single female.
In the last couple of weeks, we've been hearing about the tick-related red meat allergy.
Right.
Explain that to us and kind of some of the science behind it, what we need to be aware of, and some of the fears maybe around that, just to kind of settle some nerves perhaps.
Yeah, it certainly is a very serious condition when it develops. Fortunately, it's the minority and probably a very small minority of people who will develop red meat allergy following a tick exposure. We've only known about the phenomenon for about the last 5-8 years, so it's relatively new. We've known about red meat allergy for some time, but that link to tick exposure then precipitating red meat allergy in a human. That's what's new about that knowledge. And it's not just beef. People also react to lamb, so it's other forms of red meat. And unfortunately, once it does develop, it's usually recognized because the person undergoes a severe allergic reaction, anaphylactic-like reaction. They may report to emergency room, be treated appropriately with epinephrine, and then counseled and some discussion about what may have caused that reaction. The link to ticks is not always clear, but if someone has had a reaction to red meat, it's recommended that they go off for a few weeks, try a small amount, see if it causes the reaction, and then avoid it for as long as possible. Some people have, because people keep trying again, we know that that reaction can last for years in some people.
Dr. Little, thanks for the great information today and sharing your lab with us.
Oh, thanks for coming by. I enjoyed it.
Rain and cooler temperatures are a welcome relief in summer. This week had some warm days, but rain and cooler conditions are on track for most of the state this weekend. That wasn't the situation on Wednesday. Wednesday afternoon, temperatures for much of Oklahoma were in the 90s. Beaver had a high of 101 degrees. The coolest spots in the state had highs of 87. 80s were the norm on Monday across the state. Monday afternoon, the highest temperature was 91 degrees at Kingfisher. Tuesday afternoon, there were a lot of 90s in the state, but no Mesonet site hit 100. For cattle, Monday and Tuesday felt like warmer days than the air temperature indicated. There were a lot of sites that had maximum cattle comfort indexes above 100. Kingfisher had the highest afternoon cattle comfort on Monday, 109. Only a few locations had maximums in the 90s, the orange-red areas. We'd like the cattle comfort index to stay below 105. Tuesday, the cattle comfort indexes climbed higher. It hit 112 in Bernieville on Tuesday afternoon. 40 Mesonet sites had cattle comfort index maximums of 105 or higher. What helped cattle deal with these warm days were cool nighttime cattle comfort indexes. On Tuesday morning, the cattle felt like it was in the 50s in the Panhandle, and across most of the state, the nighttime cattle comfort indexes dropped down into the 60s. Hollis was the warmest at 73. We'd like to have the nighttime cattle comfort index stay below 75. When it goes above 75, it is too warm for the cattle to fully cool down from a hot day. Rain is really welcome in most parts of Oklahoma this weekend. A 14-day rainfall map from June 14th through the 28th had central Oklahoma with no rain. Over that 2 weeks, rain fell all around central Oklahoma, in the Panhandle, the South, the East, and Northeast. On a 30-day rainfall map, the western areas were filled in with some good rain amounts, but central Oklahoma still has a lot of blue areas with less than an inch of rain over the 30 days through Wednesday. We hope these drier areas receive a good amount of rain over the weekend. Where the drier areas and harvested winter wheat areas overlapped, they had a high burning index on Wednesday at 4 in the afternoon. Bright red areas had a burning index close to 100. That means if a fire started, these areas would have flame heights close to 10 feet. The recently harvested areas show up as the red areas on a relative greenness map. This map is a comparison of the current amount of green foliage compared to the long-term vegetation greenness. Areas with less foliage fall into the reddish scale of the percent relative greenness. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Most of the wheat's out of the field in Oklahoma, and here we are the first day in July. Kim, there's a rally in the price of wheat.
Yeah, you know, we had that dollar price rally on the cash market. We lost 25 cents of it. It rallied back this last week. I think that's good news. But the rally's due to, you know, we're losing that spring wheat crop up in the Dakotas. You can go take that lower yields all the way up into Canada. It came out this last week. The Nebraska hard red winter wheat crop is it's a disaster. It's really bad up there, and they're talking about lower yields in Montana, Wyoming, and so looks like lower production in the United States, and you know, that's got our prices higher on the cash market, plus the protein premium. You know, it's going wild. It's 12% protein, probably $1.25% premium on that. Less than 11 protein, a 16-cent discount. So the market's hot right now.
Well, and you said lower production in the U.S., but the U.S. isn't the only country that's having lower production.
That's exactly correct. Our price is really determined on the world market. This year we're about 6.7% of the world's wheat production for the U.S. You look at hard red winter wheat versus the hard wheats, we're probably around 16% of the world market. But you look at Argentina, they're up 3% this year with 643 million bushels. Their average is 500 million. Australia down 29% at 919 million. Their average is 901, right in there. Canada's down 11%. Kazakhstan's down 13%. Russia's down 5%. Ukraine down 7%. United States, as I said, down 21% for all wheat. Or if you're just looking at hard red winter wheat, we're down about 30% from last year's productions. You look at India, it's up 330 million bushels. You look at European Union, up 200 million. North Africa, up 130 million. Look at China, up 90 million. Look at Pakistan, up 30 million bushels. So those other countries, not just the importers, but the other countries, the little countries have increased their production, and so foreign production hadn't changed much. I think they got to take a look at that too.
Let's look at future prices here in Oklahoma. What do you see do you see another rally on the horizon?
Well, we've rolled over to that September wheat contract, that KC contract. If it pops $5, yeah, I think we got another 30-cent rally in there. I'm looking at, $4.50 cash by December 1, that's sticking my neck in the old guillotine. Let's hope somebody didn't get the rust off of it. But I'm cautiously optimistic for higher prices. And if we can get some protein in the 18 crop, we're going to have better than $5 wheat.
Should producers increase their production next year?
I think they should take a look at that, at higher production. Yeah, we're going to have lower prices throughout this marketing year, below the cost of production right now. The world is going to, the weather is not always going to cooperate. You look at those countries that are below the hard wheat producing countries. Yeah, they've lowered their production on average of 13%, but they've still got above average production, and that is simply weather. The weather's not always going to cooperate. When it doesn't, those prices are going up.
Okay, thank you much. Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
If you're one of those producers that's got a fall calving herd, you've probably already weaned those fall calves and saved back a few heifers to be replacements that'll go into your herd in the future. Making sure that those heifers are at the proper weight at the start of the breeding season, that'll come up in, say, November, perhaps even early December, is pretty important. And if you want a high percentage of those heifers to be cycling at the start of that breeding season, that means these calves have to gain something in the neighborhood of 1.5 to 2 pounds per head per day between now and the start of the breeding season. Well, we're going into that time of the summer where the forage quality is going to start to deteriorate just a little bit as we get into the heat of July and August and certainly September. And that means the protein content of those grasses will be going down just ever so gradually. These young growing replacement heifers, however, need protein in their diet in order to reach the growth that we want them to achieve. Therefore, I would suggest that we look into utilizing a supplement program. It's one that's been around for 30 years, developed here at Oklahoma State University for stocker operators. It's called the Oklahoma Gold program. And it's a simple concept where we feed something like 1.5 to 2 pounds per head per day of a high protein supplement. And by high, I mean 38 to as high as 45% crude protein. And I'd include with that supplement, if we're having it made, one of the ionophores, either monensin or lasalicid. By doing this, these heifers then will get the protein in addition to that that's in the grass, help them digest the forage just a little bit better, and we'll get pretty efficient growth out of this small amount of a protein package that's being fed every day. So as we go into the heart of summer, and we want these heifers to reach their target weight, let's consider the Oklahoma Gold program as one of the real efficient ways that we can get that kind of growth in these heifers and have a high percentage of them cycling when we start our breeding season this fall. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist, is here now. And Daryl, let's talk about profit potential for cow-calf producers in 2017. How are things looking this year?
You know, I think there's some decent potential for profits in 2017. We've been through an awful lot the last few years, but these markets are at a level, and I think the prices this fall will be, you know, at a level from that standpoint that would offer some profit potential for producers. You know, we've got to watch. The profit equation has two sides to it. So there's revenue and there's cost, and you know, we really have to worry about both sides of that a little bit. But in general, even on the cost side, we're getting some favorable feed prices. In general are pretty good. We've got lots of supplemental feed out there. I think forage availability and prices will be good. Fuel costs have moderated a little bit. So all of those things, I think with a little bit of management, producers have some decent potential for profits.
And speaking of management, what are some specific things that people can do to help boost that potential?
Well, you know, again, profit has two sides, revenue and cost. And so we worry a lot about market price on the revenue side. And obviously we've got input costs, but all of those market price things are things that we really don't have much control over. So, you know, we have to put our attention on the things we can control. On the cost side, obviously, we're going to try to manage our input uses in order to achieve a certain level of productivity. And on the revenue side, it's not just market price, it's how much do we have to sell. And so how many calves do we actually have available at weaning time to sell? And I think that's where a lot of our potential to boost profitability comes from in terms of managing that.
And there has to be a wealth of information out there that producers can access to kind of gauge what might work for their individual operations and their own strategy?
Well, that's right. We use a number of measures of productivity to try to give us some guidance. So, you know, if you go to the end and think about what I have to sell, so you look at that weaning percentage, for example, how many calves do I actually have to sell relative to the number of cows that started with the bull a year ago? And that's an overall kind of measure of success. Is that, you know, is that at a level it needs to be? Is it changing over time? And more importantly, we can take that weaning percentage and work backwards to kind of decompose that into various aspects of the operation. So if we back up one stage and think about calving percentage, for example, how many live calves did we get on the ground relative to the number of cows out with the bull last year? The difference between those two is calf death loss. And so what's going on there? Is that at a number that's acceptable? Is it changing over time? Could be an indication of some disease issues that we're not aware of that's causing calf mortality. Could be issues like predators and other things that may offer some potential if we identify those things. If we back up from calving percentage to the number of cows pregnant the fall before, first of all, if we're not doing preg checking and all that, we really don't know whether we're getting the job done. Pregnancy percentage is a good overall measure of the reproductive performance of the herd. And so it could be an indication on the bull side. Are the bulls getting the job done? Are we testing them with breeding soundness exams to know they're working? Or on the cow side in terms of body condition score and overall nutritional performance that allows those cows to be pregnant and to be pregnant in a timely way. So it's, are they pregnant? Are they getting pregnant quickly? That can also be an indication of disease issues, for example. So we want to monitor whether that's changing over time.
To me, it underscores the importance of record keeping, right?
You've got to have that information. In order to manage, you have to maintain that information. And then you have to sort of judge whether or not they're at acceptable levels. Are they changing? I think sometimes we just sort of accept what happens and not really think about what are the management opportunities that we have once we identify specific places, maybe where there's some weakness in those numbers or they're not at levels that we really are happy with.
And then there are resources available through Extension to help people through this.
There's lots of resources available, lots of information. First of all, just to kind of compare yourself. What is acceptable? So there's information out there about sort of what are the industry norms for these things. And then obviously if you identify specific areas that need some additional work, whether it's on the reproductive side, on the animal disease side, on the nutritional side, there's lots of resources available to help out with that.
Terrific. Daryl, thanks a lot. We'll see you again soon. And for a link to some of those resources that Daryl just talked about, go to sunup.okstate.edu. It's a choice that grocery shoppers kind of juggle with every day. We're talking about grain-fed, grass-fed, and regular ground beef. And here to help us sort it out is Tim Bowser, a food processing engineer. And Tim, why don't we kind of just start with the differences? You have a couple of patties here. There's some obvious color differences to start with. Explain.
Yes, the patty on my right is a grass-fed beef patty. Patty on the left here is a regular ground beef patty. And the difference, of course, is this patty's been sourced from animals that ranged on grass all their lives.
And there's some color differences. Talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. This patty on my right, again, the grass-fed beef patty, is lighter in color. That's just the nature of the fats that make up the patty.
We hear about grass-fed beef in the news a lot. As you put these on the grill, kind of explain for us some of the health benefits that scientists have studied as they looked at some of those properties.
Well, we do know that the fat profile in the grass-fed beef seems to be better for humans. The fatty acids are higher in omega-3s, which are better for our heart and for our blood system, and they're just more healthy in general for us.
And then what about the taste of grass-fed versus grain-fed versus regular ground beef?
Well, I can say this, we did extensive studies here at OSU on the differences between patties just like this, grass-fed and regular ground beef, and most consumers can detect a difference. Now, I can't say for sure if they prefer one versus the other, because that's a personal choice, but they can tell the difference.
Besides taste and health benefits, we also have to talk about the cost. There is some cost differences too.
Yes, absolutely. So the grass-fed beef is going to be more expensive than the regular ground beef. And it depends on where you purchase it and the time of year, and even if it's available sometimes. It's very difficult to get sometimes.
Okay, well, thanks for the information, Tim.
Well, you're welcome very much. My pleasure.
Lots of people are starting to think about how they're going to manipulate fields for hunting mourning dove. There's several different agronomic crops that are often planted and managed for mourning dove in Oklahoma. These include the various millets and grain sorghums, also corn, soybean, sunflower, and of course wheat. If you've planted wheat, it of course ripened in early summer, and you would have let that field be fallow throughout the summer, and dove readily use it all summer long into the early fall as long as that wheat seed is available. If you've not done any manipulation, now is the time to actually mow that field, or you can burn that field to make it available. And you can either do this all at once or in strips. If you want to spread the time out that doves use that field, then you would just mow or burn patches of the field and not the whole field at once. Millets would be similar. They've grown all summer and they're ripening now in late summer. They're very attractive to mourning dove, and that's a good option if you're not interested in other wildlife but solely interested in mourning dove. The various grain sorghums are very attractive to mourning dove, particularly if you're interested in hunting later into the fall, like the December season, because that seed is a high energy food source late into the winter. With grain sorghum, you're typically going to mow those fields, and hopefully you plant it at a low seeding rate early on, which will enable the doves to get in and access that field readily. And remember, for future plantings for grain sorghum, to pick varieties that have a low tannin content, or else dove and other game birds don't readily eat the seed if the tannin's too high. And if I was going to have corn, I would probably have different types of plants, not strictly corn for mourning dove, but have millet or sunflower or wheat for earlier in the season. If you have a sunflower crop, you can put cattle in there in the summer or early fall and let them shatter the seed. Soybean is a great choice if you're also interested in white-tailed deer, because they will use the plant for forage throughout the summer, and then the beans are eaten by dove and other game birds in the fall. And generally with soybean, we either want to plant at a low seeding rate so that there's lots of open spaces and bare ground that dove can access, or if you didn't do that, then again, you can mow. Now, if you didn't plant anything for mourning dove and you just have a fallow field, before you just write it off, it actually might be very attractive to mourning doves for hunting season. If you have things like pigweed or bristlegrass or Johnson grass growing in that field, then you can simply just mow those to make bare ground accessible spots, and doves will readily eat those seeds as well. So I hope these tips help you for your upcoming mourning dove season, and make sure you're safe.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.